Collective. So, disclaimer, this message, while it is about parents and children, I think it is applicable though to everyone. Even if you don't necessarily have a child, I think it's worth still hearing, because a lot of what I'm going to say isn't just about how our children mirror us, but it's also about how all relationships are actually mirrors for us really to heal from and to see ourselves clearly. This word I actually heard, I was at a meeting, and one of the moms I was talking to, we were talking about our kids, and I forget what we were saying, but I think at the time one of my kids was going through a rough patch, and this woman said, "You're only as happy as your unhappiest child." And I know that is said a lot. It's one of those things that are said. I just feel like people sometimes just say it without really thinking about what that actually means. And for me, when she said it, I was like, is that true? I had to stop. And it's been on my mind since she said it. And I remember I wrote it down as a quote, because the more and more I thought about it, the more true I realized it actually is. And I feel like as we evolve and as we get to really start prioritizing healing and spirituality and wellness and happiness and peace, we don't allow ourselves to get stuck in the whole, well, this is the way it's always been, or my parents or my grandparents used to be this way, that tough love, hardcore, cold, not really voicing or giving authenticity to real concerns, in terms of, don't speak unless spoken to. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that boundaries and accountability and structure are very important. I was going to go into that today. But we have been taught as children to fear our parents, not respect per se. I guess our thought was that if we make our kids fearless enough, that the respect will come. And this is something I've really been digesting in my mind a whole lot, y'all. I really do think that we need to move away from this fear control approach, not just to children, but to each other. It's been jammed down our throats. Think about it. Really think about it. Which brings us to the word for today. You are only as happy as your unhappiest child. All praise to the Most High God. Love to the mother. So let's get into it. Really understand. Relationships that we nurture are mirrors to ourselves. And that's why certain relationships, y'all, will be off the chain. But if you can think about who do you really care for? If you have children, hopefully you're involved and engaged parent. And if you're an involved and engaged parent, you understand that no one can get you crazy like your kids can. In a good and bad way. Crazy in terms of excitement. But they can definitely get under our skins, and our peace, our joy, our happiness gets very, very dependent upon how our kids are doing. And when our kids are struggling, when they're not happy, when they're unstable, which is a lot of kids today, y'all, it definitely rocks the foundation of the whole household. Especially in the households where kids are running it, which happens, it seems to be a lot of households. And I ain't gonna lie, I had to take my power back from my kids. My guilt and my shame of the situations I had put them in and the people that were not probably supposed to be around them were brought around. And that guilt and shame, I relinquished my power to my kids for a good amount of time. And they was running me, I'm not gonna lie. I had to take that back. And I had to, in order to do that, I had to face myself. I had to see what I had subjected them to. And then I had to try to understand why I did that. Like, why couldn't I see it? And when I did that, then I started looking at myself as a little girl and my experiences and my childhood trauma. And then I realized that I was carrying to the next generation the same trauma that had been done to me on my kids. And then I started to think about how that made me feel. And it didn't make me feel good, y'all. Then I started thinking about, well, why did my parents do that to me? And I realized that they had undergone trauma too. And it's been generational. It has carried on. My parents love me. I'll never say anything different. But they only did as good as they knew how to do. And they were taught, like so many others, that fear and control were the way to be. And they also were taught that if you do certain things for your kids, that's enough. But my childhood wasn't normal in that sense, because I, along with my sister that was right next to me, I had to be very independent, given the circumstances. And so I decided that my behavior toward them and the things that I have done, that I was going to work on. Because it like when you're programmed a certain way and you didn't even realize you were doing something, you have to be like very intentional to change it. And it takes time. So I said I was going to change that I was going to work to resolve and change the relationships with my children, which by that time had not been good at all, y'all. Coming out of my last relationship, it was the absolute bottom of the barrel. Because they didn't trust me, because they felt I didn't protect them. But I realized that I never had anybody really protect me. Not like how they should have. And that carried. And also, I didn't get the attention, the structure, the time, the presence that I needed to have. And that translated on when my kids were very young, not providing the structure that they need. I had a job. I was traveling all the time. I had a wonderful nanny, but she was like raising my kids when I was, and I finished law school, but I had this job, and the job consumed my life. I was doing wonderful professionally, but my kids needed my presence. They needed the structure that I was going to give them at a very early age, and I wasn't present. I was out there, and I'm not going to be too hard on myself. I was a single mom trying to make it happen, to live and pay the bills, very much so. So I went out there just kicking it. But I know that's the plight of so many of moms out here, that go through it. You're doing what you need to do to pay the bills, but your kids suffer as a result. And I always thought that God had blessed me, because the nanny they had, when you hear nanny, you're like, oh, she had a lot of money. I didn't have a lot of money. That woman showed up like just Mary Poppins one day. And she was so affordable. She was like, more affordable than daycares. And she was a godsend, but she wasn't me. Sometimes when we get caught up in work, we do what we have to do to survive. And things will fall because of it. And more times than not, our kids do. And so because they didn't have that structure early on, by the time I realized, hey, they didn't have the structure they need. They didn't have the discipline that they needed. And that I should have been really drilling into them. They were already 6 or 7. And then it became very hard to do it. And not only that, I realize now that for the longest, I think I'm a good mom, y'all. I love my kids. I give them everything. I probably give them too much. But there are certain things that, I see with myself that has definitely bled over into them. So I'm used to being around people and then them not giving me the warmth. Like, I'm always I've been loving to other people, but when it came to my kids, because of the trauma I had, like, it wasn't always that way. Where, when they were younger, and then when I wouldn't say they got up to 10, 11, but when they got older, like, I stopped dancing with them, I stopped asking them the questions that matter. I stopped just taking the time for them, putting aside, like, you have to put aside time for your kids individually if you have multiple kids. And they just needed to know that somebody would love and protect them, and that they mattered, so, what am I trying to say? That when it comes to it, there's one adult, one person in the world who cares for them. And while I was buying my kids stuff, taking care of the bills, doing it on my own, trying to be a super mom, again, when you're trying to do it, and you're doing the best you can do, doing it the best way you can do in the confines of that you do, still, the children can suffer, and it can have real implications on their happiness and their stability and their feeling of being safe. And so I recognize that. I didn't want to talk at you. I wanted to talk with you. I wanted you to hear, like, how my kids have been a mirror to me, and they have been a catalyst, probably the most important catalyst for my growth, for my healing. They have been the ones that have jolted me out of the slumber, out of the illusion that has draped over my life, and I never even knew it. From the childhood trauma that I had, that I never healed from. When I left home and I went to Culver, I just went straight for it, and I worked really hard. I went to Culver, I went to Princeton, I went to law school, work. And I love my kids. I give anything for them. But I got caught up in the professional, and then I forgot about the personal. And I was challenged to heal my relationships with my children, because I couldn't see myself, or I refused to see myself, because it was too painful, it was too hurtful, the truth was too real. And it wasn't until I decided to look at me straight in the face and atone for what I've done, and be real what I've done, and taking steps to undo it, even if it isn't, the results and outcomes aren't exactly how I wanted to do, and being honest with myself, like the thoughts that you have in your mind that you hear, like being really honest about things, about your kids, about yourself. It wasn't until then that I could start healing our relationships, so that their happiness would be improved, because both of them were not happy. So that their well-being would improve, so that their home life would improve, so that they could have peace of mind. And I, also, just in terms of how your kids will be your mirror, a lot of times, my kids, I feel like, have called out things that my family has historically done and said, that's just the way we do it. And these things were really bad. Like, my kids called out alcohol. Before I even decided to quit alcohol, my kids have called out smoking cigarettes, and they was like, Mom, you got to stop. I've heard that whole saying, do as I say and not as I do. That is bull crap. Can we retire that saying? Because these kids care about what you're doing and who you're being. That's what they're going to go after. And if we are modeling behaviors to them at a very young age, like sitting around drinking all day, or doing drugs, or smoking cigarettes, or smoking vapes in front of them 24/7, guess what? You are normalizing that bad behavior, those addictions. Or if you're mistreating people in your home, if you're mistreating your husband or your wife, if you're mistreating the other kids, if you're shouting all the time, if you're cussing all the time, you are programming your child. That is a form of programming. And if your house is constantly in arguments and chaos and disorder in your home, they will become accustomed to your hell, to your, very comfortable hell that you're creating for them. And guess what? They're going to mirror that when they go into school, when they go into the real world with their own relationships. So when you wondering why your kid is turning up in school, doing drugs, if you was doing drugs in the home and they saw you, you made it normal. I'm not trying to call anybody out. I'm trying to be real with you so that you can see it. And if you choose, you can heal from it. I've been down here. I'm not perfect. Okay. I'm telling y'all. If you're arguing and you cussing each other out and, you're with your partner and that's the home environment for your kids, guess what? Guess what your kids gonna do? They gonna show you, and then you gonna be upset when they showing you, that kind of behavior. Because, it could show up in different ways. They could go to school. They could be cussing everybody out. They could be popping off. They can be getting fights. They can get suspended. They cannot care about their grades. All of that originated from what happened with you. And it's not always, I want to say that too, it's not always the case that kids go off the rail. There are all kinds of different issues. There's behavioral stuff. There's physical stuff. There is, outliers, just different reasons why kids going off the rail and becoming the children of a corn, which seems to be happening a lot. But I would say 8 times out of 10, it has to do with what happened with them when they were children. And then a lot of times, y'all, we as parents will be like, I don't know, and it hurts. It hurts. And this is the other side. It hurts seeing your children make bad decisions. It hurts so bad because all you want is the best for them. All you want is to love them and to nurture them and to see them be successful. And so when we're thinking of unconditional love, a lot of us think unconditional love is I'm always there. I'm always supporting. I'm always, in your time of need. I'm stepping up no matter what you do or no matter what you do to me. Bull crap. I'm calling bull crap on this one. On this too, y'all. Unconditional love is loving someone, caring for them authentically, but you must set boundaries and you have to hold anyone that you're in a relationship accountable for those boundaries. That's unconditional love, because if you really love me, you care that I'm becoming the best version of myself every day, and that I'm abundant in my health, in my happiness, in my joy, in my peace. And if they are, doing things that are counter to that, you gotta call them out. And not just to you, but to other people. Same thing with enabling. Parents, we want to give because we don't like seeing our kids struggle. But when we do that, we stop them from learning the lessons that they need in order to grow. And then they become entitled. And then they start wigging out on us whenever we ask them to do anything. And then when everything goes wrong in their life, they blame you. And then we wonder why they're this way. It's because you kept giving them everything. You or we, again, because I'm guilty of being enabling as well. I'm working on it. But, we get mad when they act like little brats, and don't appreciate anything. But we ain't never made them work for it. So I want you, if, you're a parent or if this resonated at all with you, just take a step back and look at, if you have an unhappy child or a child that's struggling, no matter how old they are, because you can make a difference every day, every moment. It is never too late, y'all, to make a difference in improving relationships and strengthening love. You can start, even if they don't talk to you, even if they don't return a phone call right away. You can start the healing by at least being real with yourself, seeing their behavior, looking at yourself. What happened with you? And did that pass on to them? And if it passed on to them, what can you do to help them heal so that they can kill it before it goes to the next generation? Because it will carry, y'all. I hope this is helpful. I hope that it's going to, shed some light on some things.